This is Clint Warner. Welcome to today's podcast on November 5th, 2022, located in Central Point, Oregon. Again, hello, this is Clinton Warner, and welcome to the Warner Experience on Voting Rights. Today, I have Megan Allen debating for the Anti-Federalists. The Anti-Federalists are the ones against federal power and supporting state rights, as well as Adam Moeglein. He's supporting more government power in elections and voting. Will you two please go ahead and introduce yourselves?
Hello, I'm Adam Moeglein, a queer theorist who likes discussing all things equality.
Thanks for having us on today. I'm Megan Allen, a professor of law at Harvard University.
Again, welcome to the podcast and thank you for your time. As you know, we are discussing today how voting rights have changed with the Federalist and Anti-Federalist debate. So, for our first topic on discussion, let's jump right in. What parts of the Constitution do you think justify your position that the federal government should have more power? Adam, will you go ahead and start?
Thanks, Clint. I think the most essential part of the Federalist position is Article 1, Section 4 of the Constitution. Now, luckily for you guys, I brought my pocket Constitution with me, so let me read it for you. It reads that the time, places, and manner of holding elections for senators and representatives shall be prescribed in each state by the legislators thereof, but the Congress may at any time by law make or alter such regulations. This article points it out pretty clearly. Congress has the power to regulate elections for federal positions.
As you just read, the time, place, and manner of holding elections is left up for the states to decide, and that Congress can only step forward for particular cases. Their job is not to control the election.
Yeah, that's what it says. But I think what's so important about the Constitution is that it's a living document that's adapted to the times. And while at one point elections might have been separate for state and federal positions, today election law on the state level applies to all elections, and thus the federal government ought to have control over it.
Yes, the Constitution was written as a living document, but I'm sure you know what it takes to change the Constitution, and that is amendments. There are currently no amendments that give more election power to government while taking away from the states with voting rights. As you previously read, the states have the power to decide time, place, and manner of holding elections. If you want to have more power in the federal government, you need amendments, and you have none of those, so power stays with the states.
Yeah, power only stays with the states, though, when they're making good decisions for their people and not for their political agenda. When they begin putting themselves over their constituents, then the federal government needs to step in and has on multiple occasions, and the Constitution allows them to do so.
So basically, we are saying the same arguments that the Constitutional Convention had back in 1787, that the states are the policymakers and the federal government are the mediators.
Precisely.
I enjoy how both of you presented your topics and could find a common ground. Adam Moeglein, I appreciate how you brought the Constitution into our discussion, as some would say it's the greatest primary source document on the Federalist and Anti-Federalist debate. And Megan, that was a good point, how you talked about we need to follow the ideas of the framers of the Constitution. Moving on to the next topic, let's talk about the Voting Rights Act of 1965. For some of the listeners that are unaware, the Voting Rights Act of 1965 was a landmark piece of legislation that prohibited racial discrimination in voting, mainly adopted by the southern states after the Civil War. Megan, you have the floor.
Thanks, Clint. Now, I think that the Voting Rights Act extended the powers of the federal government beyond the intent of our founders. This has been proven in court cases such as Shelby County versus Holder, which struck down Section 4B of the Voting Rights Act. What it did was to make sure the DOJ greenlighted every policy from districts that racially discriminated in the 60s. That was found to have exceeded the federal power of the U.S. government to uphold the 14th and 15th Amendment.
Sure, Megan, the Voting Rights Act extends the power of the federal government, but I think this is because it's necessary. Look at what states have done with free reign. Before the Voting Rights Act was passed, poll taxes and grandfather laws passed by states made it impossible for Black people to vote. In modern times, states like Georgia have passed laws that make it illegal to give voters food or drink in line. And these are just obviously bad policies. It's not for security, it's only to minimize votes by making it harder on people to exercise their constitutional right. The only way to prevent these laws was the Voting Rights Act, which, mind you, was deemed constitutional under the 15th Amendment and was only struck down for its outdated enforcement provisions.
Yes, the VRA is a good idea, but its scope makes it impossible to enforce in a practical way. With the federal government checking each and every piece of legislation passed by local and state governments, states can pass drastically less policy to improve elections. And while some of this policy that is prevented is bad, the filter on common sense reforms prevents national change. Take Georgia, for example. If they wanted to repeal the that policy they just passed and make other improvements, they'd have to wait months or even years before the DOJ gave them approval.
Thank you to both of you for your thoughts. It looks like we're almost running out of time, so let's try to get one last topic in. Recently, the census has been completed, and states will change their district lines. Many are concerned about gerrymandering or making the maps strictly for political gain. Let's start off with you, Adam. What are your thoughts on this subject, and then we'll hear Megan's stance.
Thanks, Clint. The big concern coming around the census cycle is that of gerrymandering occurring within redistricting. Now, the census has been completed and the numbers for representatives of Congress per state has been allocated. But the big concern about this change is how the districts will be adjusted to reflect the change in population. Now, I think that redistricting should be a federal issue. Again, Article 1, Section 4 says that states have the right, but the federal government can overrule it. So it comes down to a decision of practicality. Congress passing policy like ranked choice voting or systematic redistricting measures would be a great idea, especially contrasted to state redistricting efforts, like the notoriously squiggly lines of Pennsylvania or North Carolina. And according to Ballotpedia, 33 states right now have their own legislators organizing redistricting processes for their own states, meaning they can gerrymander however they want.
Sure, gerrymandering is an issue, but local districts have certain needs that the federal government can't do. You said that Congress should pass voting reform like ranked choice voting, but that should be up to the people in each state to decide. And automated redistricting efforts can gerrymander worse than any human. The reason being is that automated systems split districts into equal population centers, and this can have disastrous effects in our modern geopolitical map. Imagine a college town with a conservative population of students, but a liberal aging population in the suburbs. If this was split by population into 10 districts, it'd look like a pizza pie with 10 liberal districts, with no representation for the college students. In the same way, cities can get split up and dissected, getting representation for modern Democrats. What this means is that states and local municipalities are at great risk for loss of representation if the federal government handles our redistricting efforts.
Well, it looks like we're out of time. That'll wrap up the Warner podcast for today. Thank you both Adam Moeglein and Megan Allen for joining me and your thoughts on this segment about voting. I hope you tune in for our next episode on how drugs won the war on drugs.
Thanks so much for having me, Clint.
Thank you.